I'm Phoebe Martinez, and 6 months ago I thought I knew everything about my family. My grandparents had passed away within weeks of each other, leaving behind their charming mountain retreat outside Denver that had been our sanctuary for decades. The plan was simple: fix it up, put it on the market, and split the proceeds with my younger brother Marcus. What I didn't expect was a single phone call that would make me question every memory I had of the people who raised me. I was sitting in my downtown office, reviewing quarterly reports for the consulting firm I'd built from scratch, when my phone buzzed. The contractor's name flashed on the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail. These renovation calls were usually about permits or material delays, nothing that couldn't wait until evening. But something made me pick up. "Ms. Martinez," Jake's voice sounded strained, almost whispered. "We've got a situation up here at the house. Found something behind a false panel in the basement workshop. You need to come see this immediately, and don't come alone. Bring your brother and your parents. This involves all of you." My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going downstairs. In 20 years of dealing with contractors, I'd never heard that tone of voice. Jake wasn't the dramatic type. He was methodical, professional, the kind of guy who sent detailed progress photos and itemized invoices. Whatever he'd found wasn't just unexpected, it was serious. Have you ever received a phone call that instantly changed how you see your entire family? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. The drive up to the mountain house usually calmed my nerves. Winding through pine forests and rocky outcroppings, watching the city fade into wilderness, had always been my escape from corporate pressure and urban chaos. But that afternoon, every mile felt heavier. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as questions spiraled through my mind. What could possibly require the entire family? Why the basement workshop that Grandpa had kept locked for years? Marcus met me in the gravel driveway, his landscaping truck parked at an odd angle like he'd arrived in a hurry. My parents pulled up moments later, Dad's expression already tense, Mom clutching her purse like a shield. We gathered on the wraparound porch without speaking, the mountain air suddenly feeling thinner than usual. Jake emerged from the front door, work gloves in his hands, sawdust coating his flannel shirt. He'd been renovating mountain homes for 15 years, had seen everything from structural damage to forgotten heirlooms tucked away in attics. But his face looked pale, almost shaken. "Follow me," he said simply, leading us through the familiar living room where we'd spent countless holidays, past the stone fireplace that had warmed so many family gatherings, and down the narrow stairs to the basement. The workshop had always been Grandpa's domain. Heavy workbenches lined the walls, hand tools hanging in perfect organization, the smell of wood stain and metal polish permanently embedded in the air. But now, a section of the back wall stood open, revealing a hidden compartment that none of us had ever suspected existed. Inside sat a steel lockbox, about the size of a briefcase, with a digital keypad glowing softly in the dim light. No rust, no age marks. This wasn't some forgotten relic from decades past. Someone had placed it there recently, someone who knew the house well enough to create a hiding spot that could go undetected for years. "Found it when we were checking for moisture damage," Jake explained, his voice still carrying that strange tension. "The wall panel was loose, came right off when I pushed on it, but here's the thing that stopped me cold." He pointed to a small metal plate affixed to the box's lid. "Look, at the engraving." I knelt down and read the inscription aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. "For Marcus Martinez. Open only in case of emergency." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Marcus stepped backward, hands raised like he was surrendering to police. "I've never seen this thing in my life. Grandpa never mentioned any lockbox, never gave me any codes or keys." Dad moved closer, squinting at the digital display. "Maybe it's old business records. Your grandfather did consulting work for years before he retired. Could be client files or tax documents." But Mom's face had gone completely white. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed against the wall for support. When I looked at her directly, she turned away, suddenly finding the ceiling beams fascinating. "Mom," I pressed gently, "do you know something about this?" She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No, of course not. Why would I know about some hidden box?" The defensive tone in her voice set off every alarm bell in my head. In 32 years, I'd learned to read my mother's tells. The way she avoided eye contact when she bent the truth about holiday plans. How her voice pitched higher when she glossed over family drama. This wasn't confusion or surprise. This was fear. Marcus knelt beside the box, studying the keypad. Digital locks usually have some kind of hint system, right? Or maybe Grandpa left instructions somewhere else in the house. "Don't touch it yet," I warned. "These things can lock out permanently after too many wrong attempts. If there's something important inside, we might only get a few tries." Jake nodded grimly. "That's why I called all of you before doing anything. Seemed like family business, not contractor business." We stood there in the dusty basement, 5 adults staring at a metal box that somehow held the power to make us all uncomfortable. The workshop felt smaller than I remembered, walls closing in as questions multiplied. Why Marcus's name specifically? Why hidden so carefully? And why did Mom look like she'd seen a ghost? "Let's think about this logically," Dad said, though his usual confidence seemed forced. "What dates would your grandfather use? Birthdays, anniversaries, important family events?" I pulled out my phone and started a notes list. Marcus's birthday, Grandpa's birthday, their wedding anniversary. But as I typed, fragments of memories surfaced that didn't quite fit. Hushed conversations that stopped when I walked into rooms. Grandpa's frequent trips to the bank during his last few years, always alone, always vague about the purpose. Mom's nervous energy whenever anyone mentioned his business dealings. "There's something else," Jake added reluctantly. "When I was checking the rest of the basement for water damage, I found these." He handed me a manila envelope that had been tucked behind some old Christmas decorations. "Fell out when I moved the boxes." Inside were bank statements, but not the usual household accounts I'd expect grandparents to keep. These were business statements for something called Martinez Family Trust, with transaction amounts that made my eyes widen. Deposits and withdrawals in the tens of thousands, dated within the last 5 years of Grandpa's life. Marcus looked over my shoulder, his expression growing more confused. "I've never heard of any family trust. Have you?" I shook my head, but my attention was caught by something else. Several of the withdrawal slips had notes in Grandpa's handwriting. Emergency fund for M. College backup plan. Protection account. Protection from what? And why the secrecy? "Maybe we should call a locksmith," Mom suggested, her voice still shaky. "Or take it to the bank. They might have records if it's related to estate planning." But Dad was already shaking his head. "If your grandfather wanted us to find this after he was gone, he would have left it with his attorney or in the safety deposit box." The fact that it was hidden means he wanted it to stay hidden. "Unless something happened that he didn't plan for," I said quietly. The thought had been nagging at me since Jake's call. Grandpa's final months had been difficult. His memory coming and going, his usual meticulous organization falling apart. What if he'd meant to tell us about the box but ran out of time? Marcus was studying the bank statements more carefully now, his finger tracing transaction dates. "Look at this pattern. Every withdrawal is exactly 30 days apart, same amount each time, like clockwork." He was right. For 3 years, someone had been accessing this account with mechanical precision, removing exactly $5,000 every month. But the last withdrawal was dated 6 weeks before Grandpa's death, and then nothing. "That's over $180,000, I calculated aloud. Where did that money go? The basement felt colder now, shadows from the single overhead bulb stretching longer as afternoon light faded outside. We'd come, here expecting to find forgotten photo albums or outdated insurance policies. Instead, we'd stumbled into what looked like a carefully orchestrated financial operation that none of us understood. Jake cleared his throat uncomfortably. I'm going to head out and give you folks some privacy, but if you need help moving that box or anything else, just call. After he left, the four of us stood in silence again, the weight of discovery settling over us like dust. Whatever was in that lockbox, whatever those bank statements represented, they were connected to secrets that Grandpa had carried alone. And as I watched Mom fidget with her wedding ring, avoiding everyone's eyes, I realized that maybe he hadn't carried them completely alone after all. The first code I tried was Marcus's birthday. Red light, soft beep. Wrong. My hands trembled slightly as I entered the second attempt. Grandpa's birthday from 1934. Another red light, another beep that seemed to echo in the small basement. Space. One more wrong attempt and it might lock permanently, I warned, stepping back from the keypad. Some of these digital safes have security features that wipe the contents if you trigger the lockout. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, stress evident in every line of his face. Try their wedding anniversary. Grandma always said it was the most important date in their lives. I punched in the numbers slowly, each digit feeling like it carried the weight of our entire family history. The keypad glowed for what seemed like an eternity, then flashed green. A soft click echoed through the basement as the lock disengaged. Inside lay a thick manila folder, a small digital recorder, and a handwritten letter in Grandpa's distinctive scrawl. But it was the letterhead on the folder that made my blood run cold. Colorado Department of Social Services, in bold print across the top, with Marcus's full name and social security number clearly visible on a dozen different documents. I lifted the folder with shaking hands, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. Child welfare reports, custody evaluations, court filings, all dated from when Marcus was 7 years old. But that was impossible. We'd been a normal family then. No social services involvement, no court cases, no custody battles. "What is that?" Marcus asked, moving closer to read over my shoulder. As I opened the folder, newspaper clippings fell out, yellowed with age, but still readable. Local boy rescued from neglect situation. Grandparents granted emergency custody. Parents face child endangerment charges. The room started spinning. These articles weren't about strangers. They were about us, about Marcus, about parents who weren't mom and dad at all, but two people whose mugshots stared back at me from the faded newsprint. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "Mom and Dad adopted me when I was a baby. You've told me that story 100 times. But as I read, further, the truth unraveled like a sweater with a pulled thread. Marcus hadn't been adopted as an infant. He'd been removed from his biological parents' home at age 7, after neighbors reported him wandering the streets at night, unfed and unsupervised for days. The emergency custody had gone to my grandparents, not because they were his relatives, but because they were licensed emergency foster parents. Mom's face had gone completely white. She slumped against the basement wall, her breathing shallow and rapid. "We never wanted you to know," she whispered. "You were so traumatized, so broken. The doctors said starting fresh with a new identity might help you heal." "A new identity?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "You mean lies. You built his entire childhood on lies." Dad stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture that looked like surrender. "It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We thought maybe when you were older, when you could handle it, we'd tell you the truth. But years passed, and you seemed so happy, so normal. We didn't want to destroy that." Marcus had gone completely silent, his face cycling through expressions I couldn't read. Shock, betrayal, confusion, anger, all flickering across his features like a broken television screen. He picked up one of the court documents, his hands trembling as he read his original name. "Michael James Patterson. That's who I really am?" The digital recorder sat heavy in my palm. I pressed play, and Grandpa's voice filled the basement, weaker than I remembered, but unmistakably his. The recording was dated just 2 months before his death. Marcus, if you're hearing this, then something has happened to me before I could tell you the truth myself. Your sister Phoebe doesn't know any of this. Her parents, my daughter and son-in-law, they made me promise to keep the secret. But secrets have a way of eating families alive from the inside. His voice paused, the sound of labored breathing filling the silence. You have a biological sister, son, Jennifer Patterson. She's been looking for you for 15 years, ever since she aged out of the foster system. I've been sending her money every month through that trust account, helping her stay stable while she searched. The lawyer said it was legal since you were a minor when the adoption happened, but she never stopped believing she'd find you someday. My legs gave out. I sat hard on an old wooden crate, the implications washing over me like ice water. Marcus had a sister who'd been searching for him. Grandpa had been secretly funding her search, and my parents had built our entire family dynamic on a foundation of deliberate deception. There's more, Grandpa's voice continued. Your biological parents both died in a car accident 3 years ago. Jennifer wanted you to know, wanted to invite you to the funeral, but we couldn't figure out how to tell you without destroying everything your adoptive family had built, so I made the choice to keep quiet, and I've regretted it every day since. Marcus sank onto another crate, his head in his hands. So they're dead. My real parents are dead, and I never got to ask them why they couldn't take care of me. I never got to forgive them or get angry at them or anything. But you have, Jennifer, I said softly, though my own emotions were a tangled mess of anger and sympathy. She's been looking for you this whole time. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely audible. We thought we were protecting you. The trauma you'd experienced, the nightmares, the way you'd panic when anyone raised their voice. The therapist said a clean break might be best, that dwelling on the past could prevent healing. That wasn't your choice to make, Marcus said, his voice carrying a steel I'd never heard before. You stole 15 years from me and my sister. 15 years of knowing each other, of healing together, of being a family. Dad tried to approach, but Marcus held up a hand to stop him. Don't. Just don't. I need time to process this. I need to figure out who I really am because apparently everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie. The basement felt suffocating now, decades of family history crumbling around us like the old stone foundation. I thought about all the times I'd complained about being an only child, wishing for a sibling to share holidays and memories with. Meanwhile, Marcus had a sister out there who'd never stopped looking for the brother who'd been erased from her life. There's contact information in the folder, Grandpa's voice continued from the recorder. Jennifer lives in Colorado Springs now. She's a teacher, married, has 2 kids. She never gave up hope that someday you'd want to meet her. I kept her updated through Christmas cards. Told her you were safe and loved, but that wasn't enough. She deserves to know her brother. The recording ended, with the soft click of the device shutting off, leaving us in silence that felt heavier than the mountain air outside. 32 years old, and I was learning that my entire understanding of my family was built on carefully constructed lies. My brother wasn't my biological brother. My parents weren't his biological parents. And somewhere in Colorado Springs, a woman named Jennifer Patterson was still waiting for a reunion that my family had actively prevented. Marcus stood up slowly, the court document still clutched in his hands. I'm going to call her, he said quietly. Tonight, I'm going to call my sister and tell her that her brother remembers her now. The way he said remembers hit me like a physical blow, because that's what this was, really. Not discovery, but remembering. Somewhere deep in his mind, Marcus had always known something was missing, something important that no one would talk about. What happens now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Marcus looked at our parents, his expression unreadable. Now I figure out how to rebuild a relationship with the sister you kept from me for 25 years, and you figure out how to live with what you've done. He turned and walked up the basement stairs, taking the folder with him. I heard the front door slam, Then the sound of his truck starting in the driveway. In the space of an hour, our family had fractured along lines I didn't even know existed. Mom was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Dad stood beside her, looking older than I'd ever seen him. And I sat there in the basement of my grandparents' house, surrounded by the tools and memories of people who'd tried to protect a secret that was never theirs to keep. The mountain house suddenly felt different, tainted by the knowledge that even here, in this place I'd always considered a sanctuary, the truth had been carefully hidden away, behind false walls and inside locked boxes, waiting for the right moment to destroy everything we thought we knew about ourselves. We knew about ourselves. The drive back to my apartment that night felt like moving through a dream where nothing made sense anymore. I kept replaying Marcus's face when he read those court documents, the way his entire identity crumbled in real time. 25 years of believing he was my adopted baby brother, and in one afternoon everything we'd built our relationship on turned out to be an elaborate fiction. My phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Mom and Dad, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was there to say? Sorry your entire parenting philosophy was based on lies? Sorry I found out my brother has been living a stolen life? The words felt inadequate, almost insulting in their simplicity. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, city lights stretching out below like scattered stars. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely unmoored from my own story. If Marcus wasn't who I thought he was, then who was I? The protective older sister who'd taught him to ride a bike and helped him with homework? Or just another person complicit in keeping him from his real family? My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, cursor blinking in the search bar. I'd typed Jennifer Patterson, Colorado Springs teacher 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Part of me wanted to find her first, to understand what Marcus's sister had been going through all these years, but another part knew that wasn't my place. This was his story to reclaim, his sister to reconnect with, his choice to make. Around midnight, my phone rang with Marcus's name on the screen. I answered immediately, my heart hammering against my ribs. I called her, he said without preamble. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. Jennifer, I called my sister. How did it go? I asked, though I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. She cried for 20 minutes straight, just sobbed into the phone while I sat there not knowing what to say. He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. Phoebe, she has pictures of me, from before when we were kids. She kept them all these years, hoping someday she'd be able to show them to me. The image hit me like a physical blow. A young girl carefully preserving photographs of a brother she'd lost, believing that love could survive years of separation and institutional barriers. While my family was building new memories and traditions, Jennifer Patterson was holding on to fragments of the past. She wants to meet, Marcus continued. This weekend. She's driving up from Colorado Springs with her husband and kids. Her kids, Phoebe. I'm going to be an uncle to children I've never met, whose existence was kept secret from me. I closed my eyes, trying to process the expanding circle of people affected by my parents' decision. It wasn't just Marcus and Jennifer who'd been separated. It was their children who'd grown up not knowing about their uncle, not understanding why part of their family history was missing. Are you ready for that? I asked gently. I don't think anyone's ever ready to meet the sister they forgot they had, he said with a bitter laugh. But Jennifer told me things tonight, Phoebe. Things about our childhood together, about what happened before the state took me away. And suddenly I'm remembering pieces I thought were just bad dreams. My stomach clenched. What kind of pieces? Taking care of her when our parents were too drunk or high to notice we existed. Making sure she had something to eat, even if it meant I went hungry. She was only 5 when they separated us, but she remembers me reading to her, singing songs to help her fall asleep when things got scary. The picture he painted was devastating. A 7-year-old boy forced into a parental role, protecting his little sister from chaos and neglect. No wonder the trauma therapists had recommended a fresh start. But erasing that history hadn't healed the wounds. It had just buried them deeper. She said something else, Marcus added quietly. She said I used to promise her we'd never be apart, that I'd always take care of her no matter what happened. And then one day I just vanished, and she spent years thinking I'd broken my promise. I felt tears burning my eyes. Marcus, you were 7. None of that was your fault. I know that intellectually. But sitting here tonight, remembering her face, remembering how scared she was, it feels like I abandoned her, like I chose the comfortable lie over fighting to get back to my real family. You didn't choose anything, I said firmly. You were a child who'd been through trauma. Mom and Dad made the choice to keep you separated. They're the adults who decided lying was easier than helping you heal properly. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of fractured family loyalty hanging between us. I'd spent my entire life seeing my parents as flawed but fundamentally good people who'd done their best in difficult circumstances. Now I had to reconcile that image with the knowledge that they'd actively prevented a brother and sister from finding each other for decades. There's something else, Marcus said eventually. Jennifer hired a private investigator 2 years ago. She found the house, found our address, even found my work information. She was planning to approach me directly, but then Grandpa reached out through her lawyer. My breath caught. Grandpa knew she was looking? More than that, he'd been in contact with her for 3 years, ever since Mom and Dad refused to tell me the truth about my biological parents' deaths. He was sending her money from that trust account, but also updates about my life, my job, my relationships, even pictures from family gatherings. The betrayal felt layered now, complex in ways I couldn't untangle. Grandpa had been secretly maintaining a connection while publicly supporting my parents' silence. Was he protecting Marcus or enabling the lie? Was he helping Jennifer or prolonging her suffering? She has photos of me at your college graduation, Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly. Pictures Grandpa sent her without any of us knowing. She's watched me grow up from a distance, celebrating milestones I didn't even know she cared about. I thought about that graduation day, how proud I'd been to have Marcus there cheering me on. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, a sister I didn't know existed was looking at pictures of the same moment, probably wondering if she'd ever get to celebrate with the brother she'd lost. What are you going to do about Mom and Dad? I asked. I don't know yet. Part of me understands they thought they were protecting me. But part of me can't forgive the fact that they had multiple opportunities to tell me the truth and chose not to. When I graduated high school, when I turned 18, when I got engaged last year. Any of those moments could have been a chance to let me decide for myself whether I wanted to reconnect with Jennifer. They were scared, I said, though the words felt weak even as I spoke them. Of what? That I'd love my biological sister more than them? That I'd choose my real family over the one that raised me? Marcus's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. They created the exact situation they were trying to avoid. Now I don't know how to trust anything they've ever told me. I understood his anger, but I also felt the familiar pull of family loyalty that had shaped my entire life. These were the people who'd raised us, who'd driven to every soccer game and helped with homework and celebrated every achievement. Did 30 years of love and support count for nothing because it was built on a foundation they'd constructed to protect a traumatized child? Maybe you don't have to choose, I suggested carefully. Maybe you can have a relationship with Jennifer and still maintain some connection with Mom and Dad. Maybe, he said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Right now I just want to focus on meeting my sister and getting to know her kids. Everything else feels too complicated to think about. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony until sunrise, watching the city wake up around me. Somewhere out there, Jennifer Patterson was probably lying awake too, preparing to meet the brother she'd never stopped loving. And somewhere else, my parents were facing the consequences of a decision they'd made 25 years ago with the best intentions and devastating results. The mountain house sat empty now, its secrets finally exposed but its future uncertain. We'd planned to sell it, to close that chapter of our family history and move forward with clean slates. Instead, it had become the place where our entire understanding of ourselves had shattered. I thought about Grandpa's voice on that recorder, the weight of carrying someone else's secret for so many years. He'd tried to do right by everyone and ended up satisfying no one. The monthly payments to Jennifer had been his way of easing guilt without forcing confrontation. But guilt, I was learning, doesn't fade just because you throw money at it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Jennifer sent me a photo of us as kids. Want to see it?" I typed back yes immediately, though my hands were shaking. The image that appeared on my screen showed two children on a playground swing set. A boy with Marcus's unmistakable smile pushing a little girl with pigtails, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. They looked happy, carefree, like any siblings enjoying an afternoon together. It was impossible to see the trauma and neglect that would soon tear them apart. Below the photo, Marcus had written, "Her husband says she carries this picture in her wallet everywhere she goes. 25 years, and she never stopped believing we'd find each other again." I stared at that image until my eyes blurred with tears, thinking about the power of love to survive, even when everything else falls apart. Jennifer Patterson had kept faith in a reunion that seemed impossible, while my family had worked systematically to ensure it would never happen. Now we'd all have to live with the consequences of those choices. The weekend couldn't come fast enough, and yet I dreaded it with every fiber of my being. Because when Jennifer arrived in Denver, when Marcus met his niece and nephew for the first time, when they started rebuilding the relationship that had been stolen from them, our family would never be the same again. Some truths, once revealed, change everything that comes after. And sitting there watching the sun rise over a city that suddenly felt foreign, I realized we were about to find out just how much damage one well-intentioned lie could inflict on everyone it was supposed to protect. To protect. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of Denver weather that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I stood at my kitchen window watching water streak down the glass, my phone buzzing with updates from Marcus. Jennifer's family had left Colorado Springs early, driving through mountain passes in weather that matched the emotional storm brewing in all our lives. My apartment felt too small suddenly, walls closing in as I paced between rooms that had been my sanctuary just days ago. The familiar spaces looked different now, like everything else in my world. The family photos on my mantle told a story I'd believed was complete, but now I could see the gaps. All those pictures of Marcus and me growing up, holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons, and somewhere else entirely, a sister was living parallel moments we'd never share. The coffee shop Marcus had chosen for the reunion sat in a quiet neighborhood near downtown, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Neutral territory, he'd called it. Somewhere that didn't belong to our constructed family or Jennifer's searching one. I arrived early, claiming a corner table where I could watch the door while pretending to read emails on my phone. Marcus walked in first, his usual confident stride replaced by something more tentative. He scanned the room like he was memorizing every detail, then caught my eye and managed a weak smile. We'd talked twice since the phone call, but seeing him in person drove home how fundamentally everything had shifted. This wasn't my little brother anymore, not really. He was Michael James Patterson, a man with a history I'd never known and a family I'd never met. "She's parking," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Brought her husband Tom and their two kids, Emma and David, 8 and 6 years old." I nodded, throat tight with emotions I couldn't name. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I threw up twice this morning. Keep thinking about what if she doesn't like who I've become? What if the brother she remembers doesn't exist anymore? Marcus!" I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "You're still you. The circumstances of how you grew up don't change the person you became." He squeezed my fingers gratefully, but his eyes stayed fixed on the window. Easy to say, harder to believe when your entire origin story turns out to be fiction. The door chimed, and a woman stepped inside, shaking rain from her jacket. I recognized her immediately, not from any photo, but from the way Marcus's entire body went rigid. She had his eyes, the same dark brown with flecks of gold, and when she spotted him across the room, her face crumpled with an emotion so raw it made my chest ache. Jennifer Patterson moved toward our table like she was walking through deep water, each step deliberate and careful. Behind her, a tall man with kind eyes shepherded two children who kept glancing curiously at Marcus. The boy had Jennifer's coloring, but the girl shared Marcus's stubborn chin, family traits that had survived decades of separation. Michael? Jennifer's voice broke on the name, and I realized she was still using his original identity. To her, Marcus didn't exist. Her brother had always been Michael Patterson, the 7-year-old who'd promised never to leave her. Marcus stood slowly, hands shaking as he faced the sister he'd forgotten he had. Jennifer, God, you look exactly like I remembered, older, but exactly the same. They stared at each other across 3 feet of coffee shop floor, 25 years of separation stretching between them like a canyon neither knew how to cross. Then Jennifer stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Marcus, and both of them started crying in a way that made every other conversation in the place go silent. I sat frozen, watching my brother embrace a woman who shared his blood, his earliest memories, his original pain. The intimacy of their reunion felt sacred and terrible, a restoration of something that should never have been broken in the first place. Jennifer was whispering words I couldn't hear, her hands touching Marcus's face like she needed to confirm he was real. I never stopped looking, she said finally, loud enough for me to catch. 25 years, Michael. I never stopped believing I'd find you. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered back. I'm so sorry I forgot you. I'm sorry I left you. You didn't leave me, Jennifer said firmly, pulling back to meet his eyes. You were taken from me. There's a difference. Tom approached quietly, children hanging back by the door with expressions that mixed curiosity and uncertainty. Jennifer's been planning this day since she was 18, he said gently. She never gave up hope. Marcus wiped his eyes and turned toward the kids, his movements careful like he was approaching wild animals. Emma? David? I'm your Uncle Michael. I've been looking forward to meeting you. The little girl stepped forward first, studying Marcus with the frank assessment only children can manage. Mommy said you forgot about us, but it wasn't your fault. She said some grown-ups made bad choices. The simplicity of her words cut deeper than any accusation could have. Out of the mouths of babes, as Grandpa used to say. Some grown-ups had made bad choices, and now 3 generations were living with the consequences. That's right, Marcus said, kneeling to Emma's eye level. But I remember now, and I want to know everything about you. What's your favorite color? Do you like ice cream? Are you good at math? Emma giggled, the tension breaking as she launched into a detailed explanation of her 3rd-grade teacher and her pet hamster named Mr. Whiskers. David joined in, and within minutes, Marcus was sitting cross-legged on the coffee shop floor, listening to stories about soccer practice and art class, and the loose tooth that the tooth fairy still hadn't visited. Jennifer sat beside me, tears still tracking down her cheeks, as she watched her brother connect with her children. He's good with them, she said softly. I always wondered if he'd still be good with kids. He's been waiting his whole life to be an uncle, I replied, though the words felt strange coming out. Because that wasn't true, was it? Marcus had been waiting his whole life to remember being a big brother. The uncle part was new territory for all of us. Tell me about your family, Jennifer said, turning to face me directly. Phoebe, right? Michael talked about you on the phone. You've been his sister all these years. The question felt loaded with potential landmines. How do you explain loving someone as family when that relationship was built on erasing their real family? How do you defend parents who'd made choices that caused this woman decades of suffering? We grew up together, I said carefully. Same house, same schools, same holidays. I've loved him as my brother since I was old enough to understand what that meant. Jennifer nodded slowly. I'm not angry at you if that's what you're worried about. You didn't know. And from what Michael told me, you've been a good sister to him. That matters more than biology sometimes. Her generosity stunned me. Here was a woman who'd lost her brother to a system that prioritized convenience over connection, and she was offering grace to the people who'd unknowingly benefited from that loss. I am angry at your parents, though, she continued, voice hardening slightly. They made choices about my brother's life without considering what it would cost me, or him, or you for that matter. I wanted to defend Mom and Dad, to explain their reasoning and the impossible situation they'd faced, but watching Marcus laugh with his niece and nephew, seeing the easy affection that bloomed between them despite decades of separation, those defenses crumbled. They thought they were protecting him, I said finally. From what? From me? Jennifer's voice carried an edge now. I was 5 years old when they took him away. I wasn't a threat to anyone. I was a little girl who lost her big brother and spent the next 20 years wondering if I'd imagined how much he loved me. The accusation hung between us like smoke from a fire I couldn't put out. Because she was right, wasn't she? Whatever trauma Marcus had experienced, whatever healing he'd needed, none of that required erasing Jennifer from his life completely. My parents had chosen the nuclear option when smaller interventions might have preserved what mattered most. Tom joined our conversation while Marcus continued entertaining the children. Jennifer went through some dark years, he said quietly. Foster homes that didn't understand her grief, counselors who told her to let go and move on. She aged out of the system at 18 with nothing but a box of old photos and a determination to find Michael. How did you two meet? I asked, genuinely curious about the life Jennifer had built while searching for her lost brother. College, Tom smiled. She was studying education, working 3 jobs to pay tuition. Our first date, she told me about her missing brother, said if I wanted to be with her, I had to understand that finding Michael was going to be part of our life together. And you were okay with that? I fell in love with someone who refused to give up on the people she cared about, Tom said simply. Seemed like a pretty good quality in a partner. Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed me photos spanning years of detective work. Private investigators, social media searches, courthouse visits, letters to adoption agencies that went nowhere. She documented every lead, every dead end, every small victory that kept hope alive. Your grandfather reaching out 3 years ago was the first real breakthrough I'd had in decades, she said. Suddenly I had proof that Michael was alive, that he was okay, that someone in your family understood I deserved to know that much at least. I thought about Grandpa, carrying that secret, managing Jennifer's hope while respecting my parents' wishes. The monthly payments from the trust account took on new meaning now. Not just financial support, but acknowledgement of a relationship that everyone else wanted to pretend didn't exist. He sent me pictures, Jennifer continued, scrolling through her phone. Your high school graduation, Michael's college graduation, family barbecues, Christmas mornings. I have a whole album of my brother's life that I experienced secondhand. The photos she showed me were familiar moments captured from an angle I'd never considered. There was Marcus at 18, grinning in his cap and gown, while somewhere Jennifer was probably crying over the milestone she couldn't celebrate with him. There was our family's 4th of July picnic last summer, everyone laughing around the patio table, while Jennifer studied the images for clues about what kind of man her brother had become. Did it help? I asked. Seeing him happy. Did it make the waiting easier? Jennifer considered the question seriously. Yes and no. Yes, because I knew he was safe and loved and building a good life. No, because every picture reminded me of what I was missing. Every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary moment that should have included me. Marcus looked up from the children and caught Jennifer's eye, some silent communication passing between them. Emma and David had claimed his full attention, chattering about everything from dinosaurs to ice cream flavors, But his focus kept drifting back to his sister like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away too long. "We should probably order something," Tom suggested. "The kids are getting hungry, and we've been monopolizing this table for an hour." That weekend changed everything, but not in the way I'd expected. Marcus and Jennifer didn't just reconnect. They rebuilt something that had been torn apart by well-meaning adults who thought they knew better. Watching them laugh with Emma and David, seeing how naturally they fell back into being siblings, I realized that some bonds can't be broken by time or distance, or even institutional interference. The mountain house sold 3 months later. We split the proceeds, but Marcus used his share differently than we'd planned. He bought a house in Colorado Springs, close enough to Jennifer's family for regular dinners and weekend visits, close enough to be the uncle he'd always been meant to be. As for my parents, that relationship is still complicated. We talk, but there's a careful distance now, an understanding that trust once broken takes years to rebuild. They see Jennifer sometimes at family gatherings, awkward conversations over holiday tables where everyone pretends the past 25 years didn't happen the way they did. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're not looking for them. Sometimes a single phone call from a contractor can unravel everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth turns out to be more complicated, but ultimately more beautiful than the carefully constructed lies we've been living with.